Hello everyone. Welcome to another live episode conversation here happening on Style to Impact. These conversations are to help you find your personal style, unlock your confidence, and of course, elevate your life. Your life. I think I'm super excited about this conversation, and I think you will be as well. If you are joining us live, say hi in the comments. I'm excited that you're here. I'm excited to have the conversation started. And of course, if you're watching the replay, let me know that you're watching. I'm going to be taking your questions as well in the comments. I'm Solita Roberts, founder and image coach here at Style to Impact. Here's the thing that I noticed that because our communication has shifted so much to interacting on screen, I honestly don't think it's going to change anytime soon. I think it's going to stay this way for a while, where we're doing most of our interactions like you are right now with me, wherever you're tuning in from. We're interacting, on this live, on this video. And I think this is the way it's going to be for a while because this is the new era. This is how we communicate. This is how we network. This is how we grow our businesses. This is how we advance our career. And for a lot of us, this is new territory. Being in this virtual space is new to most of us. I remember in 2018, I joined this Instagram group, and it was a course basically to help boost your online presence and grow your Instagram. And one of the things that we had to do was a 2-week challenge of going live every single day for 15 minutes. I cannot tell you. On my first occasion, I took my phone, I made my notes on one of these post-its, stuck it to my phone, and I was like, oh my gosh, trying to read it. And I can tell you, it was the worst video I've ever made. But what I've realized as we grow and as we take that initial step to say, okay, I'm going to do it, and you take that initial action, you will get better as you go along. Because one of the things that I've noticed as well is that your virtual presence, if it's not strong, it can affect not only your confidence, but it can affect your career and your business. So we want to be able to show up in a strong way, which is why I have a very special guest with me today, Karen Laos. Karen is the CEO and founder of Karen Laos Consulting. She's also the host of Ignite Your Confidence podcast. And we're talking today about how to show up and stand out online with confidence. Hi, Karen. Welcome.
Hello.
Welcome.
Yes,
Oh,
hi there.
absolutely. It's so great to have you here today. I know, like, we were going through, it's so fitting that just now at backstage we were having this whole thing of trying to ensure that our presence, if making sure that the paintings, it's not tilted, it's not unstable. And it was like, oh my gosh, we do this on a normal basis, and for us it's still that process of, okay, what do how do we set up, how do we get things in place that we are showing up as our best self, most confident. And I'm sure there are a lot of persons, as I said, who are struggling with this, and it's new to them. Like, I just think it's so fitting. I just think it's so fitting. And so, which is why I like talking this morning or going through my spiel here, and I'm like, oh my gosh, in my head I'm like, this is so fantastic, because you may be a professional at this, but you still go through those struggles. So tell us a little bit about yourself, and like, what is it in your space? How do you help women really ignite their confidence and show up?
Sure. Yeah. Well, first of all, I think it is really fitting what you just said that we were behind stage. And I live in a small one bedroom in San Francisco. So I'm always trying, I have very few walls to use. And it's true. It's because this is also my living space. So it's, oh,
Yep.
wait, I got to put the cushions down and make sure the painting's straight and all of these things. And so I want everybody also to know that I get it and I've been there. And specifically, I can remember years back when somebody put me on camera for the first time. And, I think one of the things that happens, especially when we're new at this, is that we put on sort of this presenter, or like suddenly we know we're being filmed or we're recorded.
Yep.
And then we become sort of, okay, and now I'm talking about this. And suddenly we put on this presenter hat, when the truth is, what we don't often think about is that we are always creating an experience for people. And if we have something that's distracting, that's getting in the way, that's going to take away from our credibility and even affect the way that people decide if they trust us or not. And so these nuances that we often don't think about, like, I don't know about you, Salita, but remember when most people started with this whole COVID thing, I had already been training people on Zoom and virtual conferences, but I remember some of the most glaring and obvious things that were a not to do is, like, I remember seeing people's ceilings fans sometimes,
Yep.
or you'd see just their chin and or
Yep.
it'd be super dark, all these things. And you go, wow, do they realize how they're coming across? Because it takes
Yeah,
away the message. Yeah.
I've seen, and I'm going to say this as well. I've been guilty of it, like in this, like even before the pandemic, as I said, where I was going through this challenge of showing up on for my business and my brand and showing up in that virtual space and doing these live conversations. I didn't know how to position my camera. Like I didn't know how to, like, where am I should, how far away should I be sitting? What should I be doing? Like I didn't know any of these things. So
Mhm.
for a lot of us, it's like, oh my gosh, what do we do?
It's so true. Well, for example, I have, and most people have a ring light. I found a great friend of mine actually introduced me to a light that was pretty reasonable. It's only
Yeah.
$54 and it is massive. It's super easy but it's so big and so bright, to your point about how I also have been guilty about some of these things with lighting, for example. It's so bright on my eyes that there are times when I just ask someone, is it okay if I don't have my light on, that you can just see me through like regular light? And it always depends on the situation. You've got to determine what's at stake, but I'd always suggest going for your best experience possible. So most of the time I have it on, but every once in a while I go, oh, can I just turn it off? Because it is very bright. It's like being in a Hollywood studio.
Yeah, I know one of the things. So I did this. One of the reasons why I wanted to connect with you and have this conversation as well is because I think it was last month I did this poll and I kind of asked, what are some of the challenges persons were experiencing going online and being able to show up. And a lot of persons, as we all are, we're working at home. And most persons don't have, as you said, you live in a one bedroom, you don't have the wall space. And I remember like in the earlies of the pandemic, I was working at the entrance of my home, there's like this little nook area. I was working in there, but every time there is like the doorbell, the cars are passing, like you heard it all. So it was like, I moved from there. Then I had to go to the dining room table. That was a mess trying to figure out how to organize and how to show up. But there are so many different parts of my home that I had to like test. And I think sometimes when we think that we have, yeah, it's like, oh, I have limited space, I have limited wall. It's like you have to pick your best wall.
Yes.
And your best wall may end up being the wall in your kitchen, or maybe in your dining room or your bedroom. And it's like picking that space in terms of how do you show up. Now I know a lot of persons are saying, one of the comments that I got was like, my space is so small,
Hmm.
how do I, if I don't have a wall, how do I show up in a way that you're not seeing my bed and you're not seeing my ironing board? Do you have any suggestions that persons can use to be able to have that level of privacy? Because
Yeah.
you don't want to have that. You don't want to have that invasion when you're on screen and talking to total strangers. But how
Right.
can I also have that professional looking background? And that's something I want to talk about later. But for now, how can I not have my bed and my kids' toys and all the different things that we have at home showing up on screen with us?
Yes. Well, first of all, the first thing you want to get as close to a wall as possible. Because a lot of times what happens is, you know how you've seen it, somebody's in their kitchen or in their dining room and you see everything behind them.
Yeah.
We have to think about, put a chair, or like me, I'm sitting with my couch just a couple of feet from the wall. And if we start there, that's the first thing. And then that eliminates as much distraction. And if possible, take anything either off the wall or just have one thing. Now, it's interesting too, because it goes back to a judgment call sometimes, because I use this wall almost all the time. And it's interesting because I don't love that it's really dark
Yeah.
personally, but I've also had people say, "Oh my gosh, I always remember your background." Somebody recently told me they remember my background from the Zoom calls. I was at a conference and they said, Every time you're on your calls, I remember that painting and your wall." But I've also had other people say, like, for example, if I'm off center, they'll say, "Oh, or it's better to be off center than my
Yeah.
head right in front of the painting." It's just funny. I mean, I think the main thing to me is that you don't have a bunch of stuff behind you. What you don't want to have is somebody looking and seeing those things rather than you.
Yeah.
They're starting to wonder, what is it behind her ear there? I can't quite figure that out. And then the other thing I want to say is a new revelation for me about a year ago when I was at a friend's place in Sacramento and I had to record a video. I was just starting my Facebook group and the summit that I hosted called Ignite Your Confidence, which inspired my podcast, by the way. But I got the advice from another friend to sit on the floor.
Oh,
And
yes.
you know that, yeah, if anybody goes to my Facebook group, Ignite Your Confidence with Karen Laos, the recording that I did, the welcome video, is on the floor of my friend's bathroom. So I'm a firm believer that you can do it anywhere, but be careful also what is in your span, because I
Yeah.
have a pillow here on the couch, and if that gets too close to me, it feels like it's kind of far in person, but the camera definitely
Yeah.
spans quite a big width. So those are some of my immediate thoughts on that. And then one other thing that I will say is make sure to get to frame yourself so that you don't have a lot of what's called white space above your
Yeah.
head, and make sure that you're the main person in the frame, where you've got your full, like, top of your head to your chest or
Yeah.
even your waist sometimes, depending upon the frame. Because if I put mine too far out, it shows too many things. That's why I can't quite do it that way.
Yeah. Oh no, I love that tip that you shared. And I think there's so many persons who don't realize that they can use that. Because if you do Google, I've seen persons saying, "Oh, don't sit on the floor." But I think that's such a great tip when you don't have like all the room space and you don't have it's like just one wall and it's like, "Okay, I need to make this video in the bathroom, but I don't have that space." And this is how I discovered this wall. I
Ooh.
was trying, as I said, I was moving around the house trying to find that space that's private, gives me a nice clean background. And I was like, okay, I'm making sure that I don't have anyone passing behind me. And one day I was sitting down on the floor right here on this. I'm like, okay, I was putting together my template to make videos. I was doing reels at the time. And I sat down, I propped the camera up on my tripod, and I sat down and I was like, oh, I'm good. I was testing recording. It wasn't an actual, I was testing. And then I looked at myself like, oh my gosh, this is the wall. Like, and sitting down at the time, I didn't have like a little table to put my flowers on. I actually rest. The flowers are on the floor, but no one knew that. And I'm sure if you go on my Instagram and you look at my reels or you look at my pictures, you cannot tell that I was sitting on the floor. Here's my tip to add to that though, because I realized that sitting on the floor, if you're trying to do a live for 30 minutes, sitting on
Yeah.
the floor trying to do a presentation, that is that is a long time to be sitting there. So here's my suggestion. What I've discovered as well. If you can get like your chair cushions and you can stack them up to sit on it. So it gives you that extra cushion under your bum. And then of course you can elevate your computer on. We have like so many of we've ordered so many things. We have Amazon boxes, empty boxes. Put your computer on that. So you're comfortable on the floor and you have your computer elevated or your phone if that's what you're using. And so you have that where you're comfortable, you have a clean background. So even if you don't have the space, there is somewhere in your home that you can sit down on the floor, make it comfortable, and have that prop. So I'm so happy that you brought that up. I want to say before we go on, I want to say thank you very much for everyone that's joining. I see Barbara, I see, which I'm gonna say my mom is on my live today, which is like,
Aw,
woohoo.
hi, Mom.
Yeah, my mom is watching. Like, yeah, thanks, mom. And we have a LinkedIn user. I'm not able to see your name, but thank you very much for joining. I'm happy that this is so helpful, which is like one of the things we talk about it, but there's still so many persons struggling on, showing up confidently in the virtual space. Now, I want to talk about posture and body language. I
Mhm.
have a problem in sitting still, being like this. And if you're on like a virtual where you maybe a team meeting or you're trying to talk to a client, it's like, how do you project confidence without fidgeting, without moving, like knowing what to do with your hands? Like what is your advice in that area?
Sure. Well, the first thing that I would say for any of this is to make sure that you're recording yourself so you can see how you're coming across. Because, yes, in the moment, you can kind of look at yourself, but you don't really get the full experience unless you see it objectively, which
Yeah.
is through watching it back. So I would start there to get a baseline of where are you at? Maybe you're not fidgeting as much as you think that you are, for example, or maybe you're doing something else that you hadn't even thought you were doing, and there's a blind spot there. So that would be number one. The other thing is to sit a little bit on your bum. So a little bit on the edge of your seat. That can help you to sit up straighter, for example, rather than getting too comfortable. Like right now, I could be seated very comfortably by leaning back, but of course, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
I want to that's why I have a pillow under my butt actually to help me
Me
sit
too. Me too.
I love it. Yeah, and then thinking shoulders back, for example, and making sure too that you're looking at the webcam, not necessarily the person.
Yeah.
I always believe in that 80-20 rule that at least 80% of the time look at the webcam and then of course glance a couple of times to look at their expressions. But related to hands then. Okay. So first of all, the hands you want to think about, you don't we're going to go through the obvious. You don't want them to be like this.
Yeah.
That's distracting. You
It's
want
so
to
difficult.
I know, it is. And then just like you're doing, you're modeling it beautifully with your hand gestures, for example. So you're still using them because that's going to project more energy also in your voice because there's something about the energetic components that we have in our bodies, like our voice, our facial
Yeah.
expressions, our posture. One tends to follow the other. So oftentimes, if we're using gestures, we tend to speak a little bit louder, even still. But I would think, first of all, what's the most distracting thing? You get that out of the way, and then use a few gestures so that people can still feel like you're using them. And I wouldn't worry about sometimes people will say, but I just think it looks weird. And they just see half of my hand like this, where you just see a little
Yeah.
bit of it. But if it were doing that constantly and you're using the same movement, this is distracting because it's becoming a pattern. But you want to think about having variety really in everything that you do. That's with your voice, that's with your facial expressions, that's with your hand gestures as well. But then here's sometimes the hardest part for many of us: rest your hands occasionally. You don't want to be constantly gesturing because that will come across as fidgety and nervous. So gesture when appropriate to illuminate your content just like you normally would, and then rest them down at your sides or on your lap when you're in the virtual space. If you're in person, you want to rest them down all the way down to your sides, not have the fig leaf in front of you or the hand clasp. We do these
Yeah.
things
It's like, ooh.
like women, we make ourselves look smaller, like holding the little purse, but we
Yeah.
want to think about, especially for those of you that are listening that are of the female gender, making sure that we come across as more powerful because we've got to use everything that we can to do that. So we generally have been trained to make ourselves smaller, so we really want to expand those gestures.
I love that. I love that tip because I've never actually thought about it. One of the things that I do before I get on my lives, I will go into like using StreamYard, you get to do the backstage before you actually go live. So I'll go on there and I'll be like, okay, so yes, I'm sitting here, and it's like, okay, where am I looking? And because honestly speaking, there's like so many things that you have to do. You have
I
to make sure that you're sitting upright. You have to make sure that you're looking at the camera, not at the screen, like you're looking that way. And it can be overwhelming, but I like what you said of remembering that one, yes, when you use your hands, because I speak with my hands like a lot, like it is part of me. I'm trying to control it now to not have it here and kind
uh-huh.
of like have it down here now, but because it helps with when I speak, having that confidence and feeling great in myself. But I like that option where you suggested it, be square, right? Think about taking up space instead of folding down like this. Because something
Mhm.
that I've noticed when I get on these calls and being on virtual meetings and networking, we tend to, because we're home, it's our sanctuary, it's our relaxed place, that we do this.
Yes. Yes.
And it's like that, this doesn't say confidence. This doesn't say, hey, hire me, or let's do business. This just says, okay, what's happening with her? So even though I may look all bright and wearing the bold colors and everything, that posture is killing the confidence and killing everything. And that's something that I do as well. What I do as well is like making sure I have a pillow in my back, I have a pillow on my bum, because what I'm doing with this pillow between the chair and my back is giving me that, first of all, creating that look of where I'm like this instead of this. Because
Yeah.
if I'm folding back in the chair, I'm this way. Look at the
Mm,
difference, this way and
mhm.
this way. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
wow,
True.
bold. So I love that you shared that tip of really looking at making sure that your shoulders are square and you're taking up the frame, taking up the space. Because I think what happens, and this is what I want to talk about as well, it's like speaking up, having that confidence to stand out, and having that confidence of really being able to show up in the online space is to speak. And speak in a way that projects your voice. Like you're
Yes.
not like, oh, can I ask a question? It's like, no, I have, here I have a question. I have like, you really project your voice and speak on that level that says, listen to me, I have something to say, right? I have one of these, like a tip that I give my clients, because when we talk or when we go through confidence in terms of how we show up in what we wear, it's also when we lack confidence in not only what we wear, we lack confidence in how we show up and how we use our voice. And so I always encourage my clients to say, whenever you enter a room, especially in a virtual space, to ask at least two questions, to let your voice be heard at least two times, even if it's just to say, I totally agree with what you just said, right? That made sense, because now
Yes.
you are inserting yourself on screen. So everyone is going, oh, who said that?
Yes.
So
Yes.
what is your take on that in terms of being able to, with all the different things that we have to do already, how do we develop that confidence to really speak up when it comes to being in this virtual space?
Yes. Well, I wholeheartedly agree. And I love that, to think about it from a quantifiable perspective, like twice to be heard. One thing that I would suggest, this is probably the scariest thing, but when you're on a meeting and somebody says, who would like to go first? Or would
Wow.
anybody like to share? Be the first one. Because within that nanosecond, after about 3 seconds, somebody will decide to go, and
Yeah.
then you might lose the opportunity. So jump in. And one of the things that I suggest, because for me, my story in part, when even though I was on a senior leadership team in the corporate world at a company, I still felt intimidated at times. And I was from the background culturally, as well as simply probably part of it has to do with me being a woman, but always making sure like everybody else would get a vote first. Or I
Yeah.
often wouldn't even say what I thought. And one day my boss said, "What do you think? I want to know what you think." And it really took me aback and kind of made me realize. She goes, most of the time you come to the table and ask all of us what we think, but you don't share your opinion. And I will say this because here's leading to my tip. it took me a little while to figure out how can I actually become more comfortable saying what I think and not being afraid of rejection or people wouldn't think that, that their ideas were
Yeah.
good because I said this, whatever. We all have these things in our heads with self-doubt. And so say instead, here's my vote,
Love
or
that.
here's what I think. Because I know that sounds probably obvious, that here's what I think, but there's something about here's my vote that feels diplomatic to me for some reason. So when I was first starting to speak up in those meetings, that felt a little more comfortable for me rather than, well, what we should do is this.
Yeah.
And I'm just not a big fan of the word should anyway. That's one thing I would suggest. And then on a technical or more mechanical perspective, remember that your breath is the thing that is supporting your voice. Your entire body is coming along with you
Yeah.
to help you speak. So speak from the diaphragm, which is this muscle right around your stomach. And a lot of times we don't even think about that. We speak from our throat. And sometimes when we're nervous, we tend to kind of get breathier like this
Oh my
and a little
gosh.
bit softer. And so you want to think about taking that deep breath like you're filling up your diaphragm or your stomach like a balloon. And then you've got the breath support to help you to physically project your voice. Because it's not enough to say, here's my vote. If you say, here's my vote, that's a totally different experience
Yeah.
than here's my vote. So those are a couple of things that are mechanically good to keep in mind. And remember to breathe. That's what I always tell people. We tend to forget. Oh yeah, that's right. I need to breathe.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna go on the on that for a moment because I find that I do it sometimes. Like I'm concentrating on, okay, I want to make sure that my shoulders are straight. I want to make sure that I'm projecting that level of confidence, and I forget to breathe. Like I'm like, no, you have to breathe. It actually relaxes you when you do that, right? And I think one of the things that I would suggest as well to work on that breathing exercise to say, okay, when I'm speaking, when I'm sitting, I need to make sure that I'm breathing. And I like what you said in terms of speaking from your diaphragm, speaking from like bringing it up from way down deep and bringing that out. Because when you do that, lifts your voice, it elevates your posture, it makes you appear as that person. I don't want to say dominant, but imagine you on a virtual meeting with 10 other persons or 20 other persons,
Right.
and you want to be able to get the speaker or the moderator's attention right away, and you being like, can I have a question, like it doesn't work. And one of the things that I want to suggest as well, especially when you're in those virtual meetings and rooms where there are multiple persons, one of the things that I highly recommend when you do what I mean you should when you're speaking in that space is to say your name, like introduce you, like say your name. This is Solita, I have a question, or this is Solita, I have. Because what happens when you're in that pool of little squares, everyone is trying to figure out who is speaking, like who is
Right.
that person that's like talking, and we never take that opportunity to actually introduce ourselves, which I think it's a great way to assert yourself into the conversation and be remembered. Like, have you ever experienced that? What are you thinking
Oh
of
my
on that?
gosh. First of all, that is a fabulous tip and very important because what you just said about being remembered, don't we all want to be memorable?
Yeah.
To your point of what you titled this session, stand out
Yeah.
online. And my tagline is stand out with unshakable confidence. So it's such a perfect fit. But that's a great way to do it. To say your name, jump in. And even I would add even a physical lean in or even something like this. Hi,
Yeah.
I'm Karen, and I'd like to add something because most of us aren't seeing hands up in by next to faces. And that's also actually a really good reminder for those of the audience that are doing videos online where you're doing a 1 to 2 minute video, say on Instagram or something like that. There are statistics that show that when someone is moving or wearing bright colors. And I know, Salita, that that is your thing. I love your colors. But those are a couple of tips too to keep in mind for people's attention span within the 1 to 2 seconds, having something moving. So it's the same thing when you see, like you said, all the squares on there and they all look the same. When there's something moving, it brings people to that. So that combined with your name, I'd say, is a beautiful recipe to be noticed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say I would caution this too. Moving, it's not just being on screen and moving, moving with intentions, because I've been on calls as well. Like, people are fidgeting, they're looking at their notifications. And while you may think that, oh, this is your computer and you're opening a browser, I mean, if you're looking at me right now and I'm like, oh, I'm browsing and I'm typing, like there's a difference not only in the lighting because I'm shifting between browsers. It can Your audience can see that you're doing
Yes.
something else. So
Yes.
movement should be intentional. Movement should be in relation to if you're talking or you're trying to get someone's attention within the meeting, and not focusing on checking your notifications, looking at your desk and kind of like moving around, because that is distracting. That is how you not only lose confidence in yourself, because if someone asks a question that required your response, then you lose that moment to really say, oh, no, you have to like, oh yes, I am, I'm getting back to that, which kind of brings me to another point. Like, there's one thing to say and suggest the tips, and something I was listening to a podcast this morning on YouTube, and it's a random podcast that I put up on, because sometimes I try to find that inspiration, that motivation to get me going. That's also something that I suggest when it comes to showing up in the virtual space. Find something that motivate you and boost your energy. That can be listening to comedy, that can be a soundtrack of something, whatever that is, to help you to feel relaxed. So I was listening to this podcast, and the gentleman was talking about, there's one thing to have the suggestions, but there's another thing to practice what we preach, right? And which I stumbled as soon as I finished listening to that, I stumbled upon this video that was talking about being confident and showing up confidently and having that, online. And the presenter was like, one moment, guys, I'm like, you're missing the point, right? You're telling and teaching someone how to be confident online, but you're fixing your hair and you're doing all these things that are distracting. This is why, for me, I suggest when I'm working with my clients, it's like, you can get everything right. Like, fix your hair, make sure that your clothes that you're wearing project, it's bold, is up for colors, right? It has that level of boldness to it. And you know that when you appear on camera, it's like, okay, everything with me is right. My sound is right. My camera is clean and ready. My notes are on screen, so that when you get on camera, you're not fidgeting and moving around trying to get yourself ready, because your audience will go like, okay, you're not ready for me. And then
Mhm,
they, are thinking of other things that they want to do, and get distracted about you not being ready for them. Like,
mhm.
so it's all about practicing what you preach and ensuring that you're showing up that way. Now, before we wrap up this conversation, I want to talk a little bit about virtual backgrounds. The reason I wanted to tap on this as well is because in that poll, a lot of persons, one of the questions that I asked, how do you feel about virtual backgrounds? And again, for that privacy reasons and not having the space, to get on live and be confident. And I'm hoping that everyone that listened today, that tip of sitting on the floor is something that you would implement, and making sure that you work with what you have. Virtual backgrounds, let's talk about that for a second. We have a couple more minutes to just kind of like wrap on that. What is your take on virtual backgrounds? And if someone is going to use it, what is your suggested or recommendation to ensure that when they're moving, it's not like glitchy? Because I find that's distracting as well, and kind of like it doesn't allow you to stand out and really show up in that confident way that you may, be trying to. What's your take on virtual backgrounds?
Yeah, it's interesting because to me, I don't want to be overly dramatic because I do think it's important to work with what you have. And if you cannot find a wall that's clean or, and I don't mean not dirty. I just mean like,
It's
anyhow,
not
if you
messy. Yeah.
yeah, if you can't find something, then I think a virtual background is okay. I would opt for the blurred background. And here's my take in general of why I personally don't like them. Because there's something about it seeming like you're not in a real environment, and that can erode trust. That's why I say I don't want to be overly dramatic, but you know how it is when somebody you're on a Zoom with somebody or they don't want to show their face, and then as they say, "Oh, well, I don't look good," or "I just got back from the gym," or but then if you say, "Come on," and they come out and then you go, "You know what? Like I'd rather see them. I'd rather see them
Yeah.
live." And this happened to me last night. I'm in a prayer group and I said, "I'm going to just listen while I eat." But then when I came on, they said, "Oh, it's so good to see you." But I remember thinking, you have to make that judgment call. But with the virtual backgrounds, the best thing, if you're going to invest in a virtual background experience or just a general experience, I would get a green screen.
Oh,
Because if you have a green screen and a virtual background on a green screen, it looks real. You don't have that in and out weird morphing of yourself to something else. But that I would say, so that would be my, if you're truly, you can get them for a reasonable price, but also all
yes.
depends on your price point. I would get a green screen so you can also just throw that up anywhere in your house, put a seat and have a virtual background, and that works really nicely. But if you don't and you're just going to use a virtual background, I would use the blurred one because that's a little bit better than the regular ones in my opinion. But I just hate the thing of somebody's hand morphing in and out. And then
Yeah.
sometimes people will try to show you something. Oh, look at this. And then it's all distorted. So it doesn't feel like it's real. And it's already hard to build authentic connections online. So you want to have everything working for you, not against you.
I could not agree. I know virtual backgrounds, even on that poll, it was like, percentage say, yes, I'm for it. No, I'm not for it. So it's a personal decision. But like what you said, Karen, is just to ensure that if you're going to use that option, ensure that it is um basically highlighting you in the best light. And it's not something that I opt for, because personally I think having this connection, like seeing me this way, there is this realness to it, there's this level of authenticity, there's this level of building that trust. Now I get it that some persons are looking for, I need to disconnect my work relationships from my from my personal space and stuff like that. But there's so many options, as you said, using the green screen. Something that I find is great as well is I saw this on someone that I connected with. I'm not sure what you call it, but it's like a screen, like divider screen that they will put behind them, just kind of like to give that officey look, but at the same time, it looks professional. They're not moving in, and it's a little bit more natural. So you want to be able to present yourself in a little bit more of a natural setting. And this is why, personally, I'm not one for the virtual backgrounds. But if that's something you want to opt for, then you go for it. But to each his own, I say. But I think one of the things, of just to wrap this up, to help you really show up in a strong and confident way online, is some of the things that we talked about, right? Finding a wall that's clean, that's comfortable, that you can put your back against, even if that means that you have to sit on the floor, that is okay. You may not be able to purchase a ring light at the moment. If you can, go ahead and do that, because I highly recommend it. If you have a window that is, some natural light coming, and it's bright enough for you, use that. But there's so many things that we already have in our homes that we can use, that we don't necessarily have to go out. But if you want to have that clean, crisp look, then of course, if you can make the investment, do that. Make sure that when you're projecting your voice, as Karen said, that you're sitting in that square, taking up some space, making sure that your shoulders are broad, and you're just being as confident as you can. So, Karen, as we wrap up, how can viewers get in contact with you, and what is one piece of like crucial thing you want to leave with them today?
Well, I'm going to say, first of all, I got to piggyback off of the tip. We've talked about it a little bit, but above all else, have lighting that's directly on your face. I'm still amazed at how many people don't have lighting that's decent. And you can, to your point of what you just said, use what you have at home, but take a lamp and take the lampshade off and put it right in front of your face. That will help a lot. I would do best lighting over anything else as the highest priority so people can see your face.
Yeah.
So that's one last tip that I would leave people with. The other thing is, if you'd like to reach me, my website is karenlaos.com, and that's Laos, like the country. I also wanted to mention, Salita, that I actually have a couple of spots open in my very intimate 5 spots only for women, a group coaching program that covers a lot of these things starting next Tuesday. If
Oh, that's
anybody is interested in that, please reach out to me. You can also email me at karen@karenlaos.com. So the biggest thing that I would also add, I'm going to say one more tip. This comes more from an internal perspective, but trust that your ideas matter. There is nobody else on the earth like you. There's nobody else that's you, obviously.
yeah.
So the world needs to hear your voice. And the saddest thing to me is, and that's a big part of my mission, is to help 10 million women stand out and specifically get uncaged from this doubt that we have inside of ourselves and really burst forth into the world in a way that gets to where we don't feel hesitant to speak up anymore. So just start. That's what I would say. And I'm
I
happy
love
to
that.
take any questions offline too. Just feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to help. And I have lots of free resources. So I appreciate being here. And I'm very passionate about this. So thanks for having me.
Yes, no, it's such a pleasure having you and being able to come together and share like this because I think it's so great that when we want to make the changes that we as women that we want to see in the world, we have to come together and collaborate, right? We have to share our expertise with just kind of cross connect and share what the resources that we have. So I want to thank you very much for joining me, Karen. It's such an honor and such a pleasure having you here. I love your mission. I'm going to try my best to match your mission as well. I'm going to try my best to match your mission as well. So one of the things that I do before we wrap up, one of the things that I do, and I think when we talk about online presence and being able to boost your confidence, there are a lot of women right now who are you're struggling with your wardrobe. And what I'm introducing is the style reset. This month, I'm booking clients and women who are ready to have that little reset because it's like, you got off track due to COVID and you were dressing not to the best of your ability. So you want to have that reset that you need. So I will be booking clients this month. I have a few spots open. So if you're interested in having that reset, really re-engaging in your style and in your appearance and ensure that you're showing up in a confident way, make sure that you book a style consultation with me. To do that, you do that at bit.ly/book a style consultation. I made that as easy as possible for you to do that. So thanks again for joining. Thank you very much for engaging in the comments. I see you. I appreciate you. We appreciate you. Thanks again, Karen, for joining. Until next time, have a great day, guys. Bye.
Bye bye.